Hi and welcome to DailyChess and my coverage of this second round of the Breisacher Memorial in Biel 2013. All three games were decisive, which is quite interesting because first round, like typical, where saw some shorter draws, no quick draws, and despite some excitement, there were simply no results. And the second round, provided three decisive games, which is quite a lot. And in this clip, I would like to present you the game between Etienne Bacrot and Ding Liren in the King's Indian, in the Makaganov system. And so let's just start straight away. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, and now instead of the f3, which is the Samish variation, also quite popular right now, there is also the so-called classical variation, which is the main move. But there's also an interesting line, starting with h3, which is called the Makaganov variation. Usually the play takes on some characters similar to the Benoni, especially if black plays like c5, white then follow with e5, closing the structures, creating some kind of a Benoni. But the main idea of h3 is, despite being a somehow waiting move, but that's not the point here because black setup is usually the same. It's to secure e3 for the bishop. Because usually if you play bishop e3, which is not a bad plan because you're playing queen d2 and then bishop h6, trying to exchange off the bishop, you usually have to deal with threat of knight g4 hitting the bishop on e3. So h3 is white simply takes time to prevent it, but to reach his desired setup. And there's also a way to play it. I think in recent times it's almost everything is played and some old forgotten lines are revived. So it's quite interesting. I think there was a book published some years ago by Brunello, the Quality Chess, attacking the that's wrong here. The King's something with the King's Indian, killed the King's Indian, or how to beat the King's Indian defense, something like this. The Quality Chess, you can just search for it on Google, which suggested this h3 line here. Okay, e5. Well, e5 is one of the ways to play. There is also c5. The drawback of this move, of the d5, let's just put it on, is that once black does not play e6 and break it up, f4, e5 might come with quite some pressure. And if he plays e6, the game simply takes on a Benoni character, which is not bad. Especially with this h3 move, the bishop doesn't have any real squares to go to, so it's maybe a bit more pleasant to play for white. Okay, e5 is the most common move right now. d5, okay, closing the position. And now also an interesting idea, which is a5. a5 is seen in many openings. The first time I met this idea was in a course on the Leningrad variation of the Dutch defense, and actually the plan is, I would say, almost the same. Black wants to make white's plan of b2, b4 as difficult as possible, not simply preventing it right now by controlling the square, and he tries to control the dark squares, especially c5 and b4, by means of knight a6. Maybe later on something like knight c5, for instance. This is quite an ambitious plan, especially since the knight maneuver knight a6, c5 does not block the light squared bishop, which can go to d7, for example, and support c6 counter blow in the center. Because anytime soon, black needs to think either about starting a pawn on the wing, or to try to crush white central dominance, which is quite annoying because he lacks in space, and it's not that easy to coordinate his pieces. He simply lacks in squares. So knight f3, knight e6, here we go, and g4. Because with the idea of b2, b4 not available, GM Etienne Bacrot decides to switch plans and goes for an attack on the king side. And with the move g2, g4, he simply stops the plan connected with knight h5 to free the f-pawn, because I think even if black should get in f7, f5, the resulting position after some exchanges there on f5 should be more pleasant for white. I will show you a recent game in which something similar happened, and in my opinion white was just a bit better. Knight c5, knight d2. Okay, the fourth pawn was attacked, and now where white frees his f-pawn, which can go to f4 even, try to open up some lines. Because now he has some space advantage here on the king side, so it wouldn't be very logical, at least despite some prophylactic manner, to play much on the queen side here. I mean, you shouldn't go for b4 right now. I mean, you have more space here, you have some weaknesses even there. So if you try to focus on the queen side, you can generate some play on the king side. Therefore, g4 is quite committing. I must admit, it's a very committing move, but first of all, it's also prophylactic, you know, just to simply stop the opponent's threats and plans. c6. Well, he cannot really get anything going here on the queen side, so this typical idea in the King's Indian of launching a pawn strongly on the king side seems also not very promising, so he goes for his remaining plan, his final plan of breaking up white's central dominance and trying to generate play on open files. For instance, if the c file opens up, to put a rook, to bishop d7, rook a to c8, simply to have some play at least, you know, because now it's very difficult to attack anything. I mean, d4 pawn is not a weakness very much. If he plays f3, simply supporting of bishop g2, even bishop, okay, not now, but later on maybe, and he simply has to create some weaknesses and aims, something to aim for. A game was recently played between Rothstein and Nizhnik, I think it's pronounced. He's pronounced in Plovdiv 2012, where 98 was played. It's a typical King's Indian maneuver, where you free the f-pawn to push it, and actually that's what happened in the game. To h4, f5. Now, Rothstein played in g5, which I didn't like it that much, because after f5 takes, I think blacks do it quite well, because the line I will show you now, the e-pawn might have been exchanged, which would be a way better structure for white, because it then could play knight d2, e4, block this dark squares, making this bishop bad for a very long time, and also attack some weaknesses, so this would be much better for white. And instead of the idea Rothstein played, you could have go for e takes f5, as I mentioned now. And after e takes f5, there's the idea of playing g takes f5, bishop takes f5, as in the game Klinger against Schlosser in Austria in 1989. And despite the fact that white might have some play here, with the c of g4, the h5, h6 push, and so on, I'm not quite convinced, to be honest. I mean, it's very sharp and it's very unclear, and it might be also lost for white in the long run. So I'm not sure how. I mean, I wouldn't play this line without any preparation. So my suggestion would be first time exchange on f5, and then followed by g4, g5. This looks a bit dangerous. I mean, of course, now these two pawns here, f5 and e5, are very mobile, which means f4 might count, e4 might count. But as we will see, both pushes have their substantial drawbacks, which are simply that they weaken squares, and white is quite well coordinated in order to exploit this. And for instance, bad would be simply f4, because we now take, and now we get the same structure here as there, but with the pawn being on e. And this one here favors white a lot. I mean, he has this powerful blockading square. He has a tremendously good knight. Probably black already has to play something like b6. And I mean, black doesn't have any real play here connected with the bishop here. And the pawns might come, especially after something like bishop d3 already to aim for f5. Maybe even bishop e2, and go here for this two weak squares, and then queen d2, queen c2, something like this. Queen f3, queen h5 maybe even, instead of the bishop, and then casting queenside. I mean, black's attack isn't going anywhere, at least for the time being, and I would say that white simply enjoys the initiative. So f4 is not possible, as we saw. It's just a bad position. So what about e4? But e4 weakens another bit complex squares, the dark squares here. The bishop is very powerful. And here I would like to plan, I don't know, at least I didn't see a refutation of it, and let's give some easy play. Queen c2. With the aim of now keeping an option of taking on c5 at the right moment, but at the same time, not only controlling some squares, and f4 is not possible because e4 would be hanging, but simply with the plan of playing f3. And some initiative. The bishop d7, for example. Let's go with f3. And this structure starts to feel a bit weak, because yeah, if he takes, the f pawn will be isolated. And for example, if he takes, we can just retake. And play something like maybe even bishop f4. First of all, to block this, then to cancel queenside to control d4, followed up by knight f3, f3 to d4, hitting the pawn, and bishop h3, rook d to f1 or rook h to f1, and simply going for this pawn. And black will face a very difficult defense. And that's an idea, something that might happen in this position, especially after text move c6, f5 might come anyway, and a similar structure might arise. So we should be familiar with some plans available. Bishop e2, bishop d7, and g5. I'm simply trying to generate some counterplay, because the structure is very, very fixed right now, and he has to create something in order to use the space advantage. He needs some weaknesses. Knight d8 and knight b3 also very important prophylactic move that takes. It's important not to take with the a pawn, because it might, at first sight, it might look very promising. I mean, you have a weakness here, and yeah, looks quite decent. You have even b4 push, but after c5, stopping both the b4 push and the replay here against the a5 pawn. Because after b6, there's only one player who can probably generate anything, which is black. And I would say black has very good chances here. Queen takes b3 is therefore better. Now this powerful knight is exchanged off. And probably Etienne Bacrot is simply, I don't know, miscalculated or misevaluated it, because after a4 he retreated. I mean, queen a3 looks more in the spirit of the idea. Probably queen c2 isn't bad, but queen a3, I don't know, for example c5, because h4, f5 now. If he now takes and plays f4, very typical idea of blocking the f5 pawn. After e4, it's important to cancel queenside first, because after h5 you can play bishop d4 and use the exposed position of our bishop on e3, because after queenside cancelling, bishop d4 just loses the pawn. And after, I don't know, let's say b6, h5, it's quite unclear. I mean, here's some ideas of h6 and then g6, breaking up the structure there, and then play rook d to g1 and try to play on the open g file. but I'm not sure if this is anything decisive, if black's doing, yeah, if he goes anywhere with this plan. Queen c2, f5 comes, h4 and f4. He closing the structure, and to be honest, I'm not sure if white really should have allowed this. I mean, after this, the problem is always that this pawns might become weak. White's play on the king side is not, I don't know, it's not really available, or it's not really, I don't know, meaningful, despite the fact that he has a bit more space there. I mean, he doesn't have any real breakthroughs. Whichever pawn he pushes, has some drawbacks, and I think that black is simply faster to generate any play there, and I'm not sure, especially in endgames, this pawns here might be very weak here, g5 and h4, because in a way they are isolated. In a way it's a pawn island, because the f4 pawn does a very great job, and very good job in simply stopping the defense by playing f2, f4, and I think black's starting to be more pleasant here. Bishop d2, knight c7. Here knight a4 was quite interesting, but I think it leads to a better position for black in the long run. For instance, c takes d, discover attack, knight b6, d takes e, and sacrificing the exchange. Knight d6 very important. Also just to go for knight d4. And the bishop, the knight cannot escape. Yeah, I think black's better. I mean, he has, I think, more than decent compensation for it, but of course it's just not very clear. But this pawns here might be very dangerous. f3, okay. Yeah, well, simply stopping f3 by black. But okay, c takes d, and queen b8. I think Etienne said in the conference that after this, b4 might be very strong. So queen b8, well, is a similar idea. First, not simply try to support this push. I think he even said that after b5, he would start to feel a bit unpleasant, because okay, if he goes kingside, black probably just breaks up. If he goes for the queen side, b4 comes, rook c8 comes, and probably black's just close to be winning. So, but okay, after queen b8, b4. Well, if he takes, I guess, because otherwise the rook is hanging. I'm not seeing too much of an attack going on, and maybe the king can even, I don't know. Well, okay, this king is very unsafe. I mean, he doesn't really have a safe location. Probably the best is to stay somewhere here. I may play bishop d3 and king e2, but black's attack is not as strong as it looks like. I mean, he has some play here, can I put the h6, he might even try to generate some play against a2, but b7 is also weak, so it's quite unclear. Rook c8, queen d3, bishop a8, rook b1, bishop e7, okay. Now already eyeing this pawn chain here, I'm playing maybe h6 just to, to soften it a bit. b5. Quite an interesting line, with one idea being to isolate the a4 pawn. As you can see, he would try to win tempi, or at least generate pressure against this pawn. To bishop d8, rook b4, knight d8, with the intention of Let's see. Well, he probably could have. Okay, if it goes with this. Oh, I'm not quite sure. Let me see. Can he play this? I guess not, right? With this, too many pieces are hanging. No, this just lost. Let me see. If it isn't. What about rook takes a4 here? I didn't even look at this line. I mean, first of all, I thought that at this point he might be the main weakness, which after knight c7, you cannot take, because if he takes, knight takes, the bishop can take, and the queen would have to sacrifice itself for two light pieces, minor pieces. But after this, rook takes a4. Why didn't he play this? Rook takes c3. Rook takes a8 stops everything. Not sure if I just miss anything. Queen takes. Probably just queen takes. And I don't think like any compensation for it. Rook takes a4. No, not here. Takes there. Takes queen a7. The knight has to move. Still, it's nothing here for me. Strange. I don't know why they didn't go for rook takes a4. Let's again check. Rook takes c3, removing the defender. Then rook takes a8, threatening the queen. So if the queen takes, just take there. And you shouldn't have enough compensation. Rook takes a d. Rook takes d8. No, this cannot be. You just sacrificed. He's just in a way simply two exchanges up. Or it's simply a rook up. Okay, if this just loses even a piece. So now this strange. Okay, but b6. Rook c5. Queen b1. And now h6. Starting with the aforementioned plan, but the problem being that black's kingside was quite safe here, and with h6 he allows white to open up lines. And after g takes h6, black's starting to get worse. King h7, knight b5. I didn't like this move very much. I thought, why not h5? I mean, after all, he's still trying to play on the king side. The only annoying move might have been this. But I think, I don't know, this should have been still much better for white. Knight b5. It felt as if he would be playing on the wrong side. But as you can see, yeah, Ding Liren simply failed to stay calm. And finally his position, yeah, I'd say his position collapsed in a way. a3, okay, supporting the rook, king h5, simply going for the next pawn, which will form with check. King d1, bishop takes h4, and bishop 1 having a pin, so d5 is forced, and bishop f2. The bishop cannot move, and the rook is quite unpleasant placed there. So decided to sacrifice an exchange, but as we will see, this proved to be insufficient. So bishop takes, d takes, rook b2, very strong. Yeah, black's position is very difficult. He has in a way two isolated pawns which are both subject of an attack, and I mean this bishop here on h4 is very useless. He cannot be freed by means of g4 because he would hang. He cannot. Look, he can go to f2, which is probably the only square, but still, if he goes, the rook might penetrate somewhere. Queen d8, knight c7, very strong. With the idea of knight takes c7, takes, queen takes, the rook penetrates on the 7th rank with decisive effect. For example, after queen c8, queen b6 check. Yeah, let's say king h5. Otherwise, yeah, if he doesn't go for this, he could play probably play queen c6, for instance, after something like this. Okay, he can even play bishop e5 with this pin, but this looks also very strong. I mean, first of all, just threatening to take there, followed by threatening on taking on d7, or just take on d7 straight away. And yeah, black's position is probably hopeless. But even after this of bishop e5, the bishop is just lost. I mean, he cannot really move because rook h7 finishes the king off, and it's also very, very dangerous. So rook c8 is in a way a must move, which has to be played. Bishop e5, knight d6, bishop takes, queen takes. And this knight here is very powerful. It simply restricts this rook, which yeah, is condemned to complete passivity. And now his idea is simply, now he wants to attack this pawn, but he cannot enter b4 right now. He cannot enter b5 because the knight controls it. So he tries to provoke the movement of this pawn here, after which b4 is available. So queen c2, hitting both a4 and c5. And c5 cannot be defended otherwise, so he has to play c4, and now rook b4 comes, and the a pawn is just a big weakness. So rook h8, knight e6. Okay, the rook moves, so the knight doesn't have to be there on c7. King f6, queen g2. The idea of penetrating the light squares somehow. Knight f7, queen h3, already aiming for f5. Rook c8, pawns behind passed pawns, but it shouldn't be very dangerous. I mean, king c2 just stops everything. But again, knight g7, offering an exchange of queens, but the idea is simply that after the queen takes, knight takes with a fork, checking the queen, king, and the bishop, losing a pawn. So c3, king c2, as I mentioned, stops the plan. Rook c5, activating the rook, queen takes d7, king takes d7, and knight f5. You already feel that this bishop here is very, very little space. I mean, you can go there to f2, but yeah, no way further. I mean, if you could just probably, you could even play rook h7, but something like rook h2 is also very strong, I guess. Or maybe even rook f1, because the bishop doesn't have really squares to go. I mean, he can go there, but he will be exchanged, and white just simply wins a pawn, being a whole exchange up. After knight e6, he even took here on t6, takes, and collected the a pawn. So which, yeah, I mean, this pawn will also quite likely fall. This bishop cannot really move, otherwise the rook will penetrate and attack also b7 and the weak dark square pawns here. So black's position is completely hopeless. And the rook b5, even rook b4. Because of the rook b4, if he takes, it's just lost. Because the king cannot penetrate the position. The only idea would have been play bishop f2, but after check, the king has to go somewhere. If he moves here, we check again and threaten to collect it, to pick it up, so he has to go from this. And after, I don't know, maybe even something like check, or to protect the pawn has to go to b8. I guess taking this pawn is critical. Let's have the bishop takes, tries to protect it. We can even go for this. Should be losing on this c3 pawn will fall. We have just to connect the password. We can even sacrifice this rook somehow. We only have to be cautious or not falling for tricks after g4 and creating this pass pawn. So if the king takes on c3, marches on to e4, f5, and maybe even threatens to pick up this pawn here, we can even give back the exchange and simply win with our passed pawns. Position is completely winning for white. After rook a5, rook b3 might have come. The king simply picks up the pawn, and yeah, it's just lost. I mean, he doesn't really have any play left. Yeah, it was quite an interesting game. I mean, first of all, this prophylactic system here, this Makaganov system, you know, preventing some ideas of knight g4 and so on. And his whole idea was, in a way, to play prophylactic here, especially after g4, and simply stopping his main plan. This to play knight d2, you know, not only defending the pawn here, but also playing knight b3, which is also quite interesting. I like this game very much, despite some maybe inaccuracies. I mean, White's position was quite dangerous. I mean, especially, you know, it wasn't very obvious where he would like to play. And okay, Liren in a way helped him a lot by playing h6 here. Where is it? Here on this 6th move. Playing h6, I mean, he just helped the crowd a lot. I mean, after g takes h6, white starts to get better, and yeah, maybe played a bit over ambitious. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this game as much as I did, and well, if you like what you saw, just subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. It's DailyChess TV, and I'll leave a comment there, maybe some suggestions. Maybe I missed something, especially in this line here. I mean, I will check it definitely, but maybe you could tell me something. Maybe I just maybe I'm not fit enough, you know, to see anything in the morning here. So maybe you could just leave a comment. Maybe you see something, spot something interesting which I just missed. Maybe this pawn take here on a4 is just bad. So okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye bye.